3 days before my 70th birthday party, my neighbor knocked on my back door at 7 in the morning and said, "Don't let them make you sign anything this weekend. Please, just trust me." I had known Shirley Beaumont for 22 years. She had watched my husband Walter die on a Tuesday in October, had sat with me in the kitchen afterward while the casserole dishes piled up on the counter. She was not a dramatic woman. She was the kind of woman who measured things twice and still apologized if they were off by a quarter inch. So when she said it, that quiet, urgent, frightened way she said it, I didn't dismiss her. I just stood there in my bathrobe holding a mug of coffee and felt something cold settle in my chest. Before I tell you what happened, I want to ask you something. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. I love knowing how far these stories travel. And I'll say up front, some details here have been adjusted for privacy, but the heart of it is real and I hope it stays with you. My name is Helen. I'm 70 years old. I live in the same house in Naperville, Illinois, that Walter and I bought in 1987 when the company first started turning a real profit. 2-story, white with blue shutters, a maple tree in the front yard that Walter planted the spring our son was born. I never changed the shutters. Some things you just leave. Whitmore Estate Planning. That was our firm. 40 years, Walter and I built it from a 2-room office on Jefferson Avenue into one of the most respected practices in DuPage County. When Walter passed in 2019, I kept it. Everyone told me to sell. The firm was worth $11 million in assets under management at that point, client trust funds, a real estate portfolio, long-term estate contracts. A lot of people told me a widow in her mid-60s had no business running something that size alone. I did it anyway. I had been running it alongside Walter for 35 years. I knew every client, every file, every clause in every contract we had ever written. My son Marcus came back from Seattle in 2020. He'd been out there doing software consulting, good money, but nothing that had ever quite become the thing he was reaching for. He was 38 when he moved back. I offered him a role in the firm, not the top, not yet, but a real one. He learned fast. He was good with clients. He had Walter's patience and his father's ability to make people feel heard. By 2022, Marcus was running daily operations. I was still the principal, still the one the major clients called, but I had stepped back from the day-to-day. I trusted him. He was my son. That spring, Marcus brought a woman named Celeste to Sunday dinner. She was 34, sharp, quick with numbers, had a master's in financial planning from Northwestern. I liked her immediately. Maybe I liked her too much, too fast. Maybe I was so relieved Marcus had finally found someone that I stopped paying attention to the details. They were engaged by Christmas. The wedding was set for the following October. I didn't see what was happening until it was almost too late. The small things started in early 2023. Marcus began suggesting I might want to formally step back. Not retire, he said, just restructure. Let him take on more official authority so the clients felt continuity. He mentioned it the way you mentioned switching brands of coffee, casually, like it was obvious. I said I'd think about it. Then Celeste started coming to the office more often. She wasn't on payroll. She called it helping with the transition, just familiarizing herself. Our office manager, a woman named Ruth who had been with us for 16 years, came to me in March and said she was uncomfortable. She couldn't explain exactly why. She said Celeste asked a lot of questions about account structure, about how the trust documents were filed. Ruth was old school. She kept paper records alongside the digital ones. She had a memory for details that had saved us more than once. I told Ruth to document anything that felt off. She nodded and went back to her desk. In June, Marcus sat me down and told me Dr. Friedman had called him. Gerald Friedman had been my doctor for 8 years. My internist, the kind of doctor who remembers your husband's name and asks after him even after he's gone. Marcus said Dr. Friedman had expressed concern about some cognitive changes he'd noticed at my last appointment. He said the doctor thought I should be evaluated. I was confused. My last appointment had been routine. I'd gone in for a blood pressure check and left with a prescription refill. Nothing unusual. When I'd pushed Marcus on the specifics, he was vague. He said Dr. Tarkas. Friedman had mentioned I'd seemed confused about my medication schedule, that I'd repeated myself twice during the appointment. I didn't remember doing any of that, but I was 68 at the time, and Marcus was my son. So the seed was planted. That summer, I started second-guessing myself, writing things down I never had to write down before. Checking my calendar twice, 3 times, I told Walter's photograph on the nightstand that I was fine, that I was still sharp, but I was no longer completely sure. By September, Marcus was suggesting I consider a formal role change. Give him power of attorney over the business accounts, he said, just as a safeguard. Standard stuff, he said. He showed me paperwork. I didn't sign it. Something stopped me, though I couldn't have told you what. In November, Celeste began talking about estate restructuring. Over dinner, with that calm professional voice of hers, she said it was wise for women my age to consolidate. She mentioned a financial vehicle I'd never heard of, something she called a unified management trust. She said it would simplify everything. She said Dr. Nonplo, Friedman, had mentioned to Marcus that I might benefit from reduced financial stress. I set down my fork. Dr. Friedman had been talking to my son about my mental state without my knowledge. I didn't say anything at the table. I smiled. I asked about the wedding flowers. 3 months later, Shirley knocked on my back door. I brought her inside. She sat at my kitchen table and wrapped both hands around the mug I gave her and told me what she had heard. 2 weeks earlier, Shirley had been picking up a prescription at the Walgreens on Route 59. She'd run into Celeste and a man Shirley didn't recognize. Tall, silver-haired, professional. They were in the parking lot. Shirley had been about to wave when she heard Celeste say my name. She stopped. She stood behind a pickup truck, and she listened. The man was a lawyer. Not our firm's lawyer, someone from outside. Celeste was telling him that the birthday party was the right moment, that I would be relaxed, surrounded by family, not thinking about business. The documents would be presented as a gift, a formal handover, she called it, a legacy transfer from mother to son. She said Dr. Friedman's assessment would be filed the following Monday. Once it was on record, the power of attorney would be automatic, irrevocable. Shirley had written down what she could on the back of her pharmacy receipt. She slid it across my kitchen table. Unified Management Trust, Hearthstone Holdings, LLC, transfer of principal authority, irrevocable upon medical certification. I looked at the paper for a long time. My birthday was Saturday, 3 days away. I didn't cry. I want to say that clearly. I sat at my kitchen table in Naperville, Illinois, in the house Walter and I had bought 33 years ago, and I did not cry. I folded the pharmacy receipt and put it in my bathrobe pocket. I thanked Shirley. I told her I would handle it. After she left, I went to Walter's study. I sat in his chair. I looked at his photograph, the one from our anniversary in 2009, Mackinac Island, Walter laughing at something off camera, the lake behind him. They thought I was already gone, I said to him. They forgot who I am. I called my attorney first. Not the firm's attorneys, my personal attorney. Joanna Park had handled my private affairs since 2015. She was 62, meticulous, and had no patience for paperwork that didn't say exactly what it meant. I told her I needed to meet that evening. She was at my house by 7. I showed her the pharmacy receipt. I told her everything. Celeste, the Unified Management Trust, the role Friedman appeared to be playing, the documents Marcus had tried to get me to sign in September. Joanna put on her reading glasses and looked at the receipt for a long time. Then she looked at me. This is elder financial exploitation, she said. If Dr. Friedman is filing a fraudulent cognitive assessment, that's medical fraud. If Marcus and Celeste formed a holding company to receive the assets, that's conspiracy. Can we stop it? Yes, but we need to move fast. How much time do we have? 72 hours. 72 hours. She opened her briefcase and took out a legal pad. Here's what we're going to do. First, she said, we need to know exactly what Hearthstone Holdings LLC is, who formed it, when, what accounts are linked to it. She wrote down a name, Frank Dwyer, a forensic accountant she had used twice before. Retired FBI. Good. Fast. Second, we needed someone to pull Dr. Dury, Friedman's professional history. She had a contact at the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation. Third, we needed to know what was in the documents Marcus had shown me in September, the ones I hadn't signed. She asked if I had copies. Ruth kept copies of everything. I called her that night. She answered on the second ring and said, I've been waiting for you to call. Ruth met us at my house at 9. She brought a manila folder. Inside were copies of every document that had come through the office in the past 8 months, including the ones Celeste had handled. Ruth had made duplicates of all of it. Old school, I had told Marcus once. He'd smiled like it was a compliment. It was. Frank Dwyer arrived the next morning. He was 67, quiet, methodical. He spread 3 folders across Walter's desk, red, blue, black, and I thought briefly of how everything important seems to come in 3s. He started with the red folder. Hearthstone Holdings LLC, he said. Formed February 14, 2023. Delaware registration. Managing partners Marcus Whitmore and Celeste Rourke Whitmore. They had been engaged for less than 2 months when they formed it. He slid a bank statement across the desk. A wire transfer. April 3, 2024. $40,000 from a Whitmore estate planning operating account to a Hearthstone Holdings account at a private bank in the Caymans. That's firm money, I said. He nodded. There are 4 more transfers. The smallest is $12,000. The largest is $85,000. Total so far, $204,000. I looked at Joanna. She looked back at me without expression. She had the face of someone who had learned to keep her reactions off her features in moments like this. He opened the blue folder. I need you to understand what Hearthstone was built to do, he said. It isn't just a holding company. He pulled out a filing document. It's structured as a blind trust with Marcus as sole trustee. The Unified Management Trust Celeste described, that was the mechanism. Once you signed, all firm assets, all personal accounts covered under the estate framework, and the property trust would transfer automatically into Hearthstone. He paused. Based on current valuations, he laid a spreadsheet on the desk. The total is approximately $4.3 million in liquid assets, plus the firm's book of business, which I'd value conservatively at another $6 million. Roughly $10 million, $300,000 total. I didn't move. He opened the black folder. Dr. Gerald Friedman, he said. I want you to know this wasn't easy to find. Somebody cleaned his record carefully. But I found it. He slid a document across, a complaint filed with the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation in 2018. A patient's family alleged that Dr. Friedman had provided a fraudulent diagnosis of moderate cognitive decline to facilitate a guardianship transfer. The case was investigated. It was dismissed for insufficient evidence. The patient, a 73-year-old retired schoolteacher in Evanston, had died 6 months after being placed in a memory care facility. She had been healthy, her family said. She had been sharp. She had simply been wealthy. Friedman received a fee, Frank said. We don't have the number, but the timeline matches a private payment into a personal account, $4,800, 2 weeks after the guardianship was approved. Is there anyone else? I asked. He hesitated. One more, a man in Schomburg, 78 years old, similar circumstances. He's still alive, Frank said. His daughter reached out to the same regulatory office in 2021. Nothing came of it, but she kept records. Can she testify? Joanna answered. If she's willing, yes. Get her, I said. I want to pause here and ask you something. if you were sitting across that desk, looking at those 3 folders, knowing that the people who had done this were also the ones who would be standing in your living room Saturday night, holding champagne? Would you have stayed calm? I don't know that I was calm exactly. I think I was something past calm. Something that arrives on the other side of grief when you have run out of room to be surprised. I told Frank and Joanna I needed an hour alone. I went out to the backyard and sat on the bench Walter had built the summer before he got sick. The maple tree in the front cast its shadow across the lawn. I thought about Marcus at 8 years old in the back seat of our station wagon, singing along to a song he didn't know the words to. I thought about Walter saying, "He's going to be something, Helen. You watch." I thought about what I had almost signed in September. I went back inside. I told them I was ready. Here is what we built in the next 48 hours. Joanna filed an emergency petition with the DuPage County Circuit Court to freeze all Whitmore estate planning accounts and block any transfer of principal authority pending investigation. The judge, a woman named Patricia Lund, who I had met twice at Bar Association dinners, signed the order at 11:15 on Friday morning. It would take effect at 8 o'clock Saturday evening. Frank contacted the Schomburg family. The daughter, a woman in her early 50s, a nurse named Beverly, agreed to participate via video call. She said she had been waiting for someone to call her for 3 years. Ruth pulled her paper records and identified 6 instances where Celeste had accessed client files she had no authorization to access. She had documented every one with dates and her own handwritten notes in the margins. Joanna drafted a timeline, 40 pages, with exhibit numbers. On Friday afternoon, Marcus called to confirm he would be there at 6 on Saturday to help with setup. I told him I was looking forward to it. I said I couldn't wait to celebrate with the whole family. He said, "This is going to be a night you'll remember, Mom." I said, "Yes, it is." Saturday came grey and cold, the way October in Illinois does, when it isn't pretending to be anything else. I dressed in the burgundy wrap dress I had bought for the occasion 3 weeks earlier, before any of this. I had breakfast alone. I sat with Walter's photograph for a while and told him what was going to happen. I told him I was scared. I told him I was ready. By 4, guests were arriving. 60 people. Neighbors, clients, old friends from the firm, people who had known Walter. Marcus came at 6 of Celeste, carrying a bottle of Veuve Clicquot and a card in a cream envelope. He hugged me at the door. He smelled like the cologne Walter had given him the Christmas before he died. Celeste handed me a small wrapped box and said, "We have something special planned for tonight, Helen." "I know," I said. "Me too." The party moved the way good parties do, warm and a little loud, everyone trying to be heard over everyone else. At 7:30, Marcus clinked his glass. He gave a toast about what I had built, what I had sacrificed, what I deserved, now that the hard years were behind me. He was a good speaker. He always had been. Celeste watched him with that composed smile of hers. At 8:15, my neighbor Shirley caught my eye from across the room. I nodded once. At 8:20, I asked for the microphone. "I want to say a few words," I told the room. They settled. 60 faces, people who had known me for decades, people who had trusted me with their estates, their futures, their family legacies. I looked at them and felt the weight of it. "I have spent 40 years in this business," I said, "because I believe that what we build in a lifetime matters, that the people we trust with it matter." I looked at Marcus. He was smiling. "I'm going to tell you a story tonight, and I need you to hear it." I looked at Ruth, who was standing near the kitchen door. She pressed a button on her laptop. The television on the living room wall lit up. The first thing on the screen was a corporate filing. Hearthstone Holdings, LLC, formed February 14, 2023. Managing partners, Marcus Whitmore and Celeste Raw Whitmore. I watched Marcus's face change. I said, 2 weeks after your engagement, you formed a holding company. You didn't tell me, and I want to explain to everyone here what that company was built to do." The room went completely quiet. I described the Unified Management Trust. I described the mechanism, the birthday party, the documents presented as a gift, the signature I would have given without knowing what I was truly signing. I described what came next. Dr. Friedman's assessment Monday morning, the irrevocable transfer of authority by Wednesday, the firm, the property trust, the accounts. Marcus stood up. "Mom, you don't understand what you're looking at." "I do," I said quietly. "Sit down." He didn't sit. I nodded to Joanna, who was standing near the hallway. She pressed a key on her tablet. Beverly appeared on the screen. She was sitting at a kitchen table, a lamp on behind her, her hands folded in front of her. She was calm and she was angry in that very specific way that comes from years of not being believed. "My name is Beverly Chastain," she said. "My father is 78 years old. He lives in Schaumburg, Illinois. In 2021, Dr. Gerald Friedman told our family that my father had moderate cognitive decline and could no longer manage his own financial affairs." She paused. "My father had just returned from a hiking trip in Montana. He was sharp as he'd ever been. Dr. Friedman's diagnosis was fraudulent, and because of it, my father nearly lost everything he spent 50 years building. The room didn't move." She looked directly into the camera. "Helen, don't let them do this to you." Celeste stood up and walked toward the hallway. Two men in dark coats stepped in from the front entry. One of them said her name. She stopped. Marcus turned to me. His face had gone through several things and landed somewhere between fury and collapse. "You've destroyed everything," he said. "No," I said. "I protected everything," he said. "No," I said. "I protected everything. You were the one who was going to destroy it." I turned back to the room. "I need to show you what was going to be transferred tonight." Frank had prepared the slide. Whitmore Estate Planning Book of Business, client accounts, operating funds, total firm value $6.2 million, personal estate assets covered under the trust framework $4.1 million, combined $10,300,000. Out of this room, out of my hands, into Hearthstone Holdings, registered in Delaware, with a Cayman account receiving funds. And then, I said, on Monday morning, Dr. Gerald Friedman, who has been my physician for 8 years, who I trusted, who sat with me after my husband died, was going to file a certification of cognitive impairment, which would make the transfer irrevocable. I would have had no legal standing to challenge it. An older man near the back of the room, one of our longest clients, stood up. He was 81, a retired engineer from Wheaton, a man named Harold, who Walter had fished with every Labor Day weekend for 15 years. He said Gerald Friedman was my wife's doctor. She passed in a memory care facility in 2020. They told us she had dementia. She did crossword puzzles every morning until the week she went in. He didn't say anything else. He sat back down. The room absorbed it. I looked at my watch. 8:57. "The court order," I said, "takes effect at 8 o'clock tonight. All Whitmore Estate Planning accounts are already frozen. The transfer cannot execute." Joanna spoke from the hallway. "The emergency injunction is confirmed. All accounts are secured." Additionally, the Illinois Attorney General's office has been notified of the evidence compiled regarding Dr. Friedman's professional conduct. Officers are present. A DuPage County officer who had been standing near the side entrance stepped forward and identified himself. He read Marcus's rights first. Marcus didn't say anything. He looked at me the entire time, and I made myself look back because I thought I owed him that much. Celeste was read her rights in the hallway. Dr. Friedman was not at the party. He was arrested at his home in Hinsdale at 9:15. Ruth came and stood beside me while the officers did what they needed to do. She didn't say anything. She just stood there. That was enough. The guests didn't leave all at once. Some hugged me. Some couldn't find words and just squeezed my hand. Harold, the retired engineer, stopped at the door and said, "Thank you for fighting. My wife deserved someone like you." I thanked him. I didn't trust my voice enough to say more. By 11, the house was quiet. Joanna, Frank, and Ruth sat with me in the kitchen. We didn't recap everything. We'd lived it. We drank tea. Ruth talked about her granddaughter's soccer tournament. Frank mentioned he'd been trying to grow tomatoes on his back porch and failing for 3 years running. Normal things, real things. At midnight, I climbed the stairs. Marcus was in county custody. Celeste was in county custody. The house was mine. The firm was mine. The accounts were frozen and intact, and I was alone in a way that was completely different from lonely. I sat on the edge of my bed in Walter's old cardigan. I'd started wearing it in October when the house got cold, and I thought about the morning Marcus was born. February, a snowstorm. Walter had driven 40 miles an hour the whole way to the hospital because he was terrified. He had held that baby like something might break. He had looked at me over the top of that small head and said, "We did something right, Helen." I thought about that for a long time. 6 weeks later, I got a letter. No return address. Postmarked Chicago. 1 page. Handwritten. His handwriting. "Mom, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to say it anyway. I told myself it was succession planning. I told myself you were getting older and that I was doing what was right. Celeste made it sound logical. She always made everything sound logical. She always made everything sound logical. But the truth is, I was angry. I'd spent 20 years feeling like the firm was more real to you than I was. After Dad died, you went back to the office in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And I actually thought that if I could just take over, if I could make myself the one who ran it, you'd finally see me. I know how that sounds. I know it doesn't make any of it okay. Nothing makes it okay. I did something unforgivable. But I want you to know, the night of your birthday, when you were standing there with that microphone, I looked at your face and I saw Dad, the way he looked when he was absolutely certain he was right. You've always had that. I just forgot it for a while. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I'm sorry anyway. I read it 4 times, then I put it in the drawer of Walter's desk and I sat there in the quiet of the study for a long time. What my son did was real. The harm was real. The intention was real. The intention was real. But so was the letter. I didn't write back. Not then. In January, Dr. Gerald Friedman surrendered his medical license to the Illinois Department of Professional Regulation pending criminal proceedings. 3 more former patients came forward. One of them was still alive, a 74-year-old woman in Oak Park who had lost guardianship of her own affairs for 11 months before her niece intervened. The other 2 cases involved patients who had died. In March, Friedman was indicted on 6 counts: fraudulent medical certification, conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse, insurance fraud. His assets were frozen, his practice closed. The Attorney General's office opened a broader investigation into Hearthstone Holdings. 2 accounts in the Caymans were identified. Total funds that had been moved, $214,000 of firm money. It was recoverable. Not all of it, but most. Celeste accepted a plea agreement in April. 18 months, reduced for cooperation. She provided documentation of the scheme's timeline. She gave them dates, emails, meeting notes. Her cooperation implicated a third party the outside attorney Shirley had seen in the Walgreens parking lot. He was charged separately. Marcus did not take a plea. His trial was set for September. I hired Jennifer Walsh as Chief Operating Officer of Whitmore Estate Planning in February. She was 57, 20 years in estate law, no connection to anything that had happened. Ruth stayed on. I gave her the title she should have had for years, Director of Records and Compliance. She cried a little and then pretended she hadn't. We implemented new protocols, no single signature authority over $50,000, mandatory external audit, annual. Any contact between a medical professional and firm personnel had to be documented and disclosed to me directly. In August, I underwent a full neuropsychological evaluation at Northwestern Medicine. 2 days, a team of 3. The report concluded no evidence of cognitive impairment, executive function, memory, and reasoning in the 92nd percentile for age. The evaluating neurologist shook my hand and said, "Ms. Whitmore, whatever you've been doing, keep doing it." I thought about what I'd been doing, running a business for 40 years, surviving a loss, deciding to keep going. In September, Marcus was convicted, 4 counts, wire fraud, financial elder abuse, breach of fiduciary duty, conspiracy. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. He would be eligible for parole in 4.5. I was in the courtroom. I sat in the 3rd row. When they read the verdict, he turned around once. He looked at me. I looked back. There was nothing left to do with that look, except hold it. I drove home and sat under the maple tree in the front yard. The October light came through the leaves the way it does in Illinois, low and gold and a little sad, like it knows it's almost over. I thought about Walter planting that tree. I thought about what he would say. I think he would say, "You did the right thing, Helen." And then he'd say, "Now go inside. It's getting cold." So I did. In November, I got a second letter. Different handwriting this time. Misrawled. "Whitmore, my name is Beverly Chastain. We spoke briefly by video call in October. I wanted to write to thank you. My father watched the news coverage of the Friedman indictment. He called me after. He said, and I'm writing this exactly because I don't want to lose it. He said, 'Bev, that woman fought for people she didn't even know. You call her. You write her a letter. You tell her my father says thank you.' So that's what I'm doing. My father's name is Howard. He's 78 years old. He still hikes. He's going to Glacier National Park in the spring. He wanted me to tell you that. I wrote Beverly back. I told her I was glad her father was going to Glacier. I told her the fight hadn't been only for me. I told her I hoped the spring was good to both of them. By December, Whitmore Estate Planning's client accounts were fully restored. 3 clients who had quietly begun moving their business during the uncertainty came back. 2 of them apologized. I told them I understood. I would have done the same. Our revenue projection for 2025 was $4.8 million in active management fees, higher than any year Walter and I had together. Jennifer Walsh had brought 2 new institutional clients. The firm was growing again. On December 28th, I updated my estate documents. Jennifer Walsh was named operational successor. I restructured my personal trust. I added 1 instruction at the end, something I asked Joanna to put in language that would hold. If I die, tell Marcus I forgave him. Tell him that forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was acceptable. Tell him it means I refuse to carry it with me for the rest of my life. Tell him that's something his father taught me. In January, a text arrived from a number I didn't recognize. Then I realized I did recognize it. I had deleted it from my phone in October, but I still knew it. "Mom, I know I don't have the right to ask. I know what I did. I'd had a lot of time to think about what Dad would say. I think he'd say I failed you. I think he'd be right. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I almost took. Not the money, not the firm, you." I sat with that text for 3 days. On the 4th day, I wrote back 2 sentences. "I know you understand. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." That was all. It was enough. It was all I had. Spring came slowly in Naperville, the way it always does, like it isn't quite sure winter is finished. In April, I planted something new along the back fence, a row of lilac bushes, the kind that bloom purple in May. Walter had always meant to plant lilacs. We never got around to it. I planted 5 of them, 1 for each decade I'd spent building something real. I was out there with a shovel in my good gardening gloves when Shirley came around the side gate with 2 cups of coffee from the place on Washington Street that does them properly. She handed one to me. She looked at the lilacs. She didn't say anything. We stood there in the April mud drinking coffee and looking at 5 small bushes that wouldn't bloom for another month. I've thought a lot about what happened, about what I almost let slip through my hands and why. The honest answer is that I made it too easy for them, not because I was careless with the firm. I wasn't, but I was careless with the space between us. I let Marcus feel like the company was the proof of my love rather than the thing I was building for him. I was so focused on the legacy that I forgot to tend to the person it was meant for. He didn't betray me because he was greedy. He betrayed me because he felt like a visitor in his own inheritance, and I did that. Celeste found a wound I had already opened, and she put her hands in it. That's the truth I've had to sit with. If you're watching this and you're building something, a business, a family, a life, don't do what I did. Don't let the work become the relationship. Your children don't need the proof of what you built. They need to know they matter more than it does. Say it out loud. Say it more than once. Don't make them feel like the second priority in the story of their own family. I got a second chance, standing in my own living room on my 70th birthday, holding a microphone in a burgundy dress. Not everyone does. I know that. But maybe you do too. Maybe it's not too late to put down the quarterly report and pick up the phone. Choose presence. Choose the people. The work will still be there. The lilacs bloomed in May, purple and full and smelling like everything Walter never got to see. I stood at the kitchen window with my coffee and looked at them for a long time. I thought about calling Marcus. I wasn't ready, but I thought about it, and that felt like something. Thank you for walking through this with me. If it sat with you, if it made you think about trust or family or what we owe each other, I'd be grateful if you stayed. And if you've been through something like this yourself, I'd truly like to hear from you in the comments. I'm still here, still standing, and I will be for a good while yet. I've thought about cause and effect a lot since that October, not in an abstract way, in the very specific, uncomfortable way you think about it when you're the one who helped create the conditions for your own betrayal. Marcus didn't wake up one morning and decide to steal from me. That's not how these things work. What happened between us built slowly, over years, in the accumulation of small choices I made without realizing they were choices at all. I chose the quarterly report over the Saturday morning breakfast. I chose the client call over the birthday dinner. I told myself I was building something for him, and I was, but I never bothered to ask whether he felt that way. I assumed the legacy spoke for itself. It didn't. That's not an excuse for what he did. I want to be clear about that. What Marcus did and what Celeste designed was deliberate and cruel and wrong. The harm was real. It would have been real whether I had been a perfect mother or a flawed one. But I've had to be honest with myself about the crack that was already there. The one they slid their hands into. I put it there. Not intentionally, but I put it there. Here's what I've come to understand about integrity. It's not a thing you have or don't have. It's a practice. The same way staying physically strong is a practice. You build it by making consistent choices, even inconvenient ones, even when no one is watching. When Ruth came to me with her concerns about Celeste, she had been practicing integrity for 16 years, quietly, precisely, keeping her paper records alongside the digital ones because that was the right thing to do. Nobody told her to. She just did it. And that practice, her daily commitment to doing the job correctly, is what saved me. Integrity doesn't announce itself. It just shows up when you need it. What Celeste and Dr. Friedman did requires a different kind of analysis. People who exploit others, especially people they have promised to care for, don't do it because of some sudden moral collapse. They do it because they have spent years practicing small dishonestries and discovering they can live with them. Each compromise makes the next one easier. That's the real danger, not the dramatic villain who appears from nowhere, but the person who slowly trains themselves to rationalize until the unthinkable becomes, to them, simply practical. The consequence of that, what I watched happen in my living room that Saturday night, was not something I inflicted on Marcus. It was the natural end of a road he had been walking for a long time. I just refused to walk it with him. What I want you to take from this, if you take anything, is this: the most important thing you can build is not a business or an estate or a financial legacy. It's the kind of character that holds when things get hard. Wisdom means seeing clearly, including seeing yourself clearly, your own blind spots, your own absences, the places where you substituted work for presence and told yourself it was the same thing. Resilience means getting back up after the clarity arrives, after you've seen what you missed, and doing something useful with the knowledge instead of drowning in regret. I planted lilacs in April because Walter always meant to, and we never got around to it. That small thing mattered more to me than it probably should have, but I think that's what moving forward actually looks like. Not a dramatic gesture, not a speech, just a woman in her gardening gloves doing something she'd been putting off for 30 years. It's not too late to plant something. It's almost never too late.